Think Tank is a community that exists to elevate the industry and be a place for healthcare providers and clinic owners and entrepreneurs to come together to collaborate and really inspire each other. A lot of valuable insights are held up in silos, and it does nothing to elevate the industry. I mean, where do you go to hear thought leaders and industry experts tell their story? That's why we built this. In season 1, we're going to talk rivalries. We're going to really unpack the concept of rivalries and why it's important to exist in any industry. We're going to talk to thought leaders and industry experts in the therapy space and really unpack how they cross-collaborated with their rivals in an effort to build the businesses they built and become the industry leaders they became. Let's begin. All right. Welcome to another episode of Think Tank. I'm your host, Kevin Merishow, chiropractor and regional director at Mild Detox Toronto. I'm joined with my co-host, Nick Lowe, my guy, physiotherapist, chief operating officer of Mild Detox. We got a special guest today. Dave, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
We're good. Dave Leyland, physiotherapist, co-founder of Coast Performance and Rehab out in Vancouver. Pleasure to have you on the show today, man.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on the podcast. This is actually my first podcast experience in general. I actually don't even listen to podcasts myself. So
wow. You have no time. You barely had time to carve out to get on here with us, man. So we get it. We get it. You're a busy guy, man. You're a busy guy, man. You're building something incredible, and that's what today's conversation is about. So we get it. We get it for sure, man. But
I'm excited.
Before we dig in, word on the street is you're a big basketball fan.
Yes, sir. I'm really stoked on the big Raptors W game 1 against Brooklyn last night. So I know Nick might not be too happy about that, but
I'm not a Raptors fan. I'm not a Raptors fan.
It's just not his first choice.
No.
I'm a little surprised about the Orlando upset this morning. So I'm not getting too hyped about that yet because Orlando beat Raptors game 1 last year, but that would be pretty sweet upset. I'm looking forward to Portland versus Lakers tonight though too.
Yeah, the bubble action's been very interesting. It's way more competitive than I thought it was going to be. Way more interesting.
Yeah.
And
I think both the NHL and NBA have done a good job actually of creating a good TV content.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, no. I was gonna actually ask, have you been a Raptors fan since the beginning, or?
Oh yeah. Since the Vince Carter slam dunk contest.
But were you a Grizzlies fan before?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm confused. Like, yeah, because I know you're a big Raptors fan, and I'm not that I'm confused. It's just, in Vancouver.
It's over. That's what it started. That's when it started, really, right there.
Got it. So, just quick question: who are the top 5 Raptors of all time?
Oh man,
top 5 Raptors of all time.
Yeah.
That's a tricky one because you don't know where to throw in Kawhi, right? But I'm gonna go with Kyle Lowry. I'm gonna say number 1. I know he gets some hate, but at the end of the day, I think he's the bulldog. So I think you might have to put him at number 1. I don't know. I might have to say you have to put Kawhi number 2 just for what he did, honestly. And then I think you got to go Vince number 3, DeRozan number 4, Chris Bosh number 5.
Wow.
Kevin? I agree with the whole list, top to bottom. I have no qualms. We could cut the podcast now. Actually, we're done. We're good. I'm good.
I don't know about the order. I for sure don't agree with the order. Number 1. There's no way Kyle's number 1. But I would actually replace Kyle with either, you guys gonna hate this, I'm gonna say Damon Stoudemire.
Yeah.
Or T-Mac.
Okay.
What this reveals is your true values. That's what it does. That's all.
I'll show.
I've never been a big Kyle fan. That's all. I think he's a hard worker for sure. And I think he's come a long way in terms of, where he is now and where he started. But I can't put my,
Kyle's got a little LeBron in him, in that he complains about every call, which is disappointing. That's the one thing I don't like about Kyle. But I think at the end of the day, his leadership is pretty unwavering. So,
like I said, Dave, value system. Nick's a shooter. That's why.
I am a shooter, but it was after that flop he did. You guys remember that flop that Kyle did, where his head bounced back twice on the same play? I can't. Ever since that play, there's no way Kyle could ever be top 5 in my books.
So if I bring it back to values again, Nick holds grudges, so it all makes sense. He can't let things go. But anyways, man, guys, we can make the entire podcast about the Raptors. I can do that. We'll save that for part 2. But I want to dive in, Dave.
Yeah.
For the listeners out there, I'd love to hear a little bit of everybody. Even for myself, we had a little bit of a touch base, 15, 20 minutes as we prepared for this, but we'd love to hear more of your backstory on. I know you're originally from BC and you did a lot of your schooling out here on the East Coast in Ontario. Love to hear why the decision to come to the East Coast. And then when you were here, you didn't stay, you went back West. Talk to us about that, your early experiences and all of your training, everything that led you to this point.
Yeah, so I grew up here in Vancouver, and I decided to go to Queen's University for 2 reasons. One, they actually had a unique physical education program or kinesiology program at the time where you actually got 2 bachelor's degrees. So I thought that was pretty intriguing, but at the end of the day, it probably didn't really make too much of a difference. But I at the time, as 18, I was like, oh, that's sweet. I'm going to go get 2 bachelor's degrees because there was a unique program at the time.
Right.
I also just kind of wanted to get out of the Vancouver bubble a bit and, kind of escape the UBC and SFU trap where you kind of just end up hanging out with your old homies. And I kind of wanted to branch out and explore life a little bit differently. And Queens was an amazing time. I had a great 6 years there. I did undergrad and right into physiotherapy school. Loved Queens, loved the campus, had a great time. Can't say enough about it. I'm always pumping my high school patients to go to Queens all the time.
Amazing.
When I was there, basically coming out of high school, I knew I wanted to go into physiotherapy. I just had a few really good experiences in high school where I was like, this seems like a great career. You can kind of stay connected to the athletic community. Seems really rewarding and fulfilling. So basically at Queens, I was like, what can I do to get there? And so basically I joined the student athletic therapy program. So I worked with the hockey team, which was great experience, basically from second year to fourth year. And I was also basically an intern with the strength and conditioning program as well too. So throughout that experience, I got a lot of exposure to athletics. Wasn't necessarily the best for my grades, and kind of lucky I got into physiotherapy school, honestly, but wouldn't get in these days with the crazy grade requirements needed. But the work experience there in both those programs was valuable. Physiotherapy school, it's great, kind of nothing too exciting to note there. When I finished up school, I had the opportunity to stay in, the Ontario region. Probably would have worked in the GTA area, but at the end of the day, I was like, where do I see myself in 5 or 10 years? And it was back on the coast. So I was like, better to come out here and kind of start my career fresh out here than, get started 2 or 3 years. And then maybe I'd get stuck in the Toronto trap, so. So glad I came back out here. Started at a athletic performance facility out here, which was a very fortunate way to start my career. Got connected to lots of good teams and kind of athletes in the community and coaches. Decided to kind of branch out on my own after about 3.5 years and kind of worked in my own little office space for a couple years. And then about 1 year into that, me and my business partner, Clayton Cross, who I also met at the athletic performance facility, we started kind of coming up with some thoughts and going back and forth. And we basically had similar visions in what we wanted to create. And over a year and a half long process, we kind of created what we wanted.
Got it. That's amazing, man. To be honest, I thought that you were gonna say Jason Kahn was the reason why you head out east and you head to Queens. For those Jason is a physiotherapist, owner of Mild Detox Yorkville and director out there. But he speaks very highly of you, man. He's talked about you for a really long time, and he's like, yo, Dave on the West Coast, he's doing incredible things. So I'm just glad to be able to hear your breakdown, your story on the East Coast. We lost a good one when you went back west, man. I didn't meet you at that time, but clearly you're doing incredible things now with this with Coast and what you guys built.
You guys are lucky to have Jason. He's great and very charismatic guy, and he's very skilled guy as well too. So you guys are super lucky to have him. So that's awesome.
Yeah, really lucky, man. He's doing incredible work and building something special with the Yorkville team for sure.
Yeah, I actually had a phone call with him just a week or two ago, and I felt really bad for him because opened a clinic and 2 months later, COVID.
Yeah.
Like that's literally the worst situation possible. And he was telling me that the Yorkville clinic's in a mall, and I was like, oh man, brutal.
Yeah, tough break for
you guys are
for the entire industry, you know. But he is a resilient guy, and he's gonna figure it out. He's gonna figure it out. So yeah, you spoke about going back to the West Coast and, you know, meeting your partner and starting something beautiful that you guys are building right now. Like, I'd love to dig into that, you know, entrepreneurial spirit. It's not for everybody. Not everybody has a stomach for it. Like, talk to us about, you know, was it something you had in your back pocket and you're thinking about doing the entire time, or did you have like this light bulb moment, like, you know what, I want to do my own thing?
That's a good question. I don't think it's something that necessarily was always on my mind, but I think what happened with me is kind of in my university experience when I started getting into the, you know, student athletic therapy position and the strength and conditioning world, I quickly realized that it's a grind of an industry. And I always want to be kind of really good at what I do. And once I realized that in these particular industries, if you want to get to that level, you're not coasting. For sure, pardon the pun there, but
no pun.
But no, you have to grind, and so I quickly realized that in university, and my work ethic was through the roof. Throughout university, I was basically working like 40 hours a week, and even throughout physiotherapy school, just because I loved it. I just loved what I was doing, and it wasn't necessarily even entrepreneurial at the time. It was just soaking it all up and loving it. And then quickly, kind of when I got in my physiotherapy career, I was just doing it. I was working long days, and I quickly realized, like, if I'm going to be working these long days, I may as well be creating something I really want to be a part of.
Right.
And I actually kind of not necessarily wanted to start this, but I actually did have a bit of a falling out with the athletic facility I was working at, which was unfortunate because, you know, I totally would have been willing to like grow something awesome with that company as well too. And that's something that kind of, we'll talk maybe a bit later on about it, but with Coast is like a big value for us is like growing with the people that we are supporting, like growing as a team, because that just wasn't present in some of my earlier experiences. And I want to foster that in a work environment and help others grow.
Got it. Yeah. So as you mentioned that, like, do you feel like you hit a ceiling and like clearly the ceiling was there and you weren't going to be able to break through? Got it. And then I guess you took that learning and built that as a part of the new value system of what you're building at Coast.
Exactly.
Got it. Nick, if you could jump in, man, like clearly there's a lot of parallels and you guys share a lot in common. I guess the value system is, I can't use the Raptors as a litmus test because like you guys clearly share a lot in common. Nick, if you could talk to us about, you know, we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but you know, the physio room days and your entrepreneurial spirit, and was it a similar story, or did you kind of always know all along you wanted to start physio room and do your own thing?
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously talked about it before, but then I think it's a very common theme just within the industry of you know, feeling a bit of a ceiling or feeling stagnant in what you're accomplishing or what you're doing. And you know, at a point you might start to feel that there's maybe a little bit of a point of diminishing returns where maybe the company's growing a lot more than you are at that point. And you know, it's always nice to grow together as a team. And you know, I think like when you have that culture where everyone really feels like they're all growing kind of at the same rate, you know, some might be further ahead, some might be, you know, a little bit earlier in their career, but at least everyone's always growing. And building that culture is not something, you know, that was very common in the past, I guess. And you know, obviously Dave's done a great job at Coast, and there's a lot of clinic owners right now out there with great companies that follow a very similar path, which is great to see. I think, you know, this is the only way we can kind of advance as a profession. But, you know, and I come from a time when it's like I'm older than Dave. Dave is like, I came from a time which is, you know, when it was probably even worse. Right. So, but very similar concept of just, you know, you're busy, you know, you're treating every day. You don't feel the camaraderie and the culture of like challenging each other, and you end up kind of in a little bit of a silo where, you know, you go to your room, do your thing, and mind your own business. And it's nice to, talk to people about growth and, goals and that kind of stuff.
Right. For sure.
So.
For sure. Dave, like on that same topic of, I guess what you guys share in common with this like collaborative nature that health and wellness, I guess, took a turn. Like, can you identify a point in time where it sounds like there was this prehistoric time where most clinics had this ceiling to offer, and it was like, I don't know, the elephant in the room, where there was not a lot of discussion or conversation around, in order to grow with the team and to continue to evolve, like, you got to grow with the people that surround you. Like, was there a turning point that you guys either of you could identify?
That's a good question. I know we have a list of questions that you sent me, and I think we might get to it later, but and I know some clinic owners might listen to this, maybe even Nick and you will hate me for saying this, but a big part of like, I just hate that old school model of physiotherapy clinics where it's like, especially in Ontario, it's even worse, I believe, where it's like paying people like 40%, and like you could be a physio there for like 10, 15 years and you maybe get like 45% in Ontario.
Right.
And here in BC, it might be more like 50, maybe 55. And to me, it's like, a 10-year vet, a 15, 20-year vet, as long, like typically they're going to be a bit of a rock star in my mind. They should be, at least they should be, but not always. They bring so much value to the clinic. And I think one of the things that we truly do at Coast is we try to value our clinicians. And I think that's something where I think a lot of people hit that ceiling and then they just end up kind of going off and doing their own thing. Whereas if you kind of just raise the ceiling a bit and support your teammates, at the end of the day, like, yes, we're a business, but we want to support our teammates, number one. And, giving them a little bit of a bigger piece of the pie is going to go a long way in terms of us growing the business. And if they want to eventually do their own thing, how can we support them to kind of do their own thing with us versus like them just going, and if they're going to go do their own thing, that's fine. And, thank you for your 5 years or whatever. And we loved having you. And we want to have positive exits. Whereas I think so many clinics, it's like, it just turns so negative at the end. And me and Clayton both had kind of bad experiences with that. And it's something we truly value, is how can we value our staff kind of throughout the process and grow with them. And then if they do leave, how can we have a good exit?
Of course, for sure. Yeah, you mentioned the idea of raising the ceiling, just a bit on the value end. And clearly comp is one, but have you identified other areas of value that your team has really latched onto and like, I want to be here because of this?
Yeah, I think culture number two, and mentorship. I definitely try to do as much mentoring as I can. I think, I'd love to always do more. Sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough. Yeah, that's important. And then in terms of culture, I think we've done a good job of hiring good people. And the one really thing I'm proud of with Coast is like everybody seems to just love the team atmosphere, and they just rave about it. And I'm so stoked, and like I'm so pinch myself sometimes with how far we've come in 2.5 years. Right,
it's amazing. Dig into mentorship a little bit more. I think it's a very broad topic, and we all have preconceived notions as to what mentorship looks like. But what does mentorship look like at Coast? Like, what do you hang your hat on?
In particular, let's just say with like the physiotherapists, a handful of our younger physiotherapists, I made them shadow me for kind of extended periods of time. And I think that really helped them. I think that really helped them to see how I'm working, see how Clayton's working. And then I also was leading them through like hands-on practice sessions, just little half hours here or there too, throughout the weeks where they were kind of being onboarded. And I think that's really important for kind of, you're not like forcing anybody to treat a certain way, but you're just kind of providing as much guidance as you can as to kind of how the clinic might treat as a whole on average, but bring your own kind of spice to the mix as well. Right.
So another thing you guys have in common, Dave, you've experienced this a little bit more recently than Nick has, but you're building one clinic. Your first one's in North Shore.
Yep.
And then at some point you decide you wanna replicate this and you wanna do this all over a second time. Yeah, talk to us about that. Like, what inspires opening up a second clinic? I guess some of the growing pains that comes with that, and where you're at now.
Well, So one thing I think a lot of people probably don't know is, so for the past like 5 or 6 years, I've actually been treating out of a small clinic downtown, small little space downtown. So even when Coast opened for
Mm-hmm.
the year and a half before we opened Kitsilano, um, I was working out of a small little space like 2 half days a week. So I
Mm.
was working long days at Coast, but like Tuesday mornings and Thursday mornings, I was working downtown. And so, and Clayton was as well too, actually, because we had this kind of connection downtown at the space. It was a good gig. We were just kind of renting it, and it made sense to keep that going because we always knew we'd want to do a second clinic probably.
Mm.
And then it just kind of came down, and we we saw this space come up, and we were like, I don't know if we can make it work. And then it kind of sat there for another like 3 or 4 months, and you're like, I think we can. We visited a few times, and the space is 2/3 the size of North Van, but it's a little bit more boutique. But it's got a great location, and we're really happy with it. And we kind of put the call out there trying to see if there was anybody interested in kind of maybe being a clinic manager, and we found somebody that kind of fit the bill for what we were looking for,
Mm-hmm.
and then we just ran with it, and luckily there was a decent amount of interest to grow a team from there. So it could have been a disaster, I guess, but I think we had enough faith kind of in the Coast brand. This one little bit might sound a little cocky, but I talk to some clinic owners sometimes, and they're like, "Oh, we're really struggling to get applicants. Like, we get a ton of applicants, and I feel like Mao Detox and that's probably the same to some degree. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we're just always telling people, sorry, we're just not hiring. We're just not hiring. So I'm extremely grateful for that, and I think part of that's maybe the space we created is very attractive
Right.
to, especially younger therapists that are looking to treat a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
and then also I think they get excited about the culture and the logos and the Instagram or whatever. But
Right. All of those
Yeah.
layers matter. All of those layers matter for sure. For sure. On the point, I guess, of logos and branding. Yeah. Talk to us about, brand development and thinking about, the name of Coast, where it came from, what inspired it. And, at the time when you decided you were going to go that route, like, were there any other players in the space that inspired what you built?
Yeah, so I think Nick will like this, but I think the two kind of when we were creating Coast, we wanted to create a space with an awesome gym space because we didn't want to be a clinic where it's just a bunch of private rooms and then a little gym space with like a Bosu ball and a pulley system, and that's it. So we wanted to create a space where it's like truly people can get after it and relearn their movement patterns and truly strengthen their bodies as they need.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so we always knew it was going to be called something performance rehab.
Got it.
So we were kind of just going back and forth on a bunch of different names. I actually forget all the different names, but I think my wife one day was just like, "Why don't you just call it Coast?" And then that was
It
it.
just stuck.
Clayton liked it, I liked it, and it was easy. I guess it might limit our like cross Canada reach potentially one day, but we'll see about we'll deal with that eventually if that ever comes up. And then yeah, in terms of players, there's a big space out here called Fortius. So Fortius is like, I don't know, probably $100 million space that's just like created by some rich investors. It's an awesome space with lots of great clinicians and strength coaches. It's an elite performance center.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was Physio Room, which was at the time was this great kind of community connecting clinic that was kind of hip and cool. And Fortius was this beast. So it's like, how can we kind of create a smaller Fortius on a more like community based level? That's kind of
Got it.
what our vision was to some degree.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll actually add to that because the first time I actually went to Coast was at the open house that you guys had, and I remember walking in there with Andrew, who was at Pivotal at the time because they didn't join Myo yet at that time, and then Laura from Kids Physio, and all I can remember was just how big the space was because maybe I wasn't expecting it. I walked into the space and it was like massive rooms, like I remember they had the turf, probably some sleds, a lot of squat racks, just a lot of equipment, a couple trainers. was it Alter G, which I was kind of like, wow, these guys bought an Alter G. Like that's impressive. But just, I remember how big the space was and how, like, in all honesty, like jealous we were, all of us, me, Laura, and Andrew, we're just used to much smaller spaces. Like our spaces were nowhere near that large. And funny, Dave actually brought up like Physio Room and Fortius, because I remember telling Andrew at that time, this is kind of like a blend of Physio Room and Fortius.
Crazy. It's amazing.
Yeah, because it had like the aesthetic, right? Like Physio Room was always about the aesthetic. We wanted it to be, just something different, a little bit clean, logo design focused, a little bit more modern. And Fortius was like I had all the bells and whistles that no normal clinic owner could ever afford. So that was like on the performance level, it was always like the gold standard. And Coast kind of had that perfect blend between the two, which I think for sure at that time, and probably even till now, I don't think any clinics like that in Vancouver anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah, and part of me wonders, like, I don't know, we're not necessarily trying to be a trendsetter, but I'm interested to see if the industry will start kind of going in the direction we went, or if it's just going to kind of be, the more typical clinic layout. But as I was telling you guys in our pre-talk, it's like, it might not be the most lucrative per square foot model that, some people might preach about, but we enjoy it. And it's, for us, it's, I'm not in this to be a millionaire. I'm, sure I want to be a business owner and have some success. But for me, at the end of the day, it's about doing what I want to do, inspiring others on my team, and having that really good atmosphere, and while still seeing a bit of success.
Right. Yeah, and I think like you nailed it on the head there, where Rivalries is a special concept, because although all the rivals in the space push each other to evolve and iterate on their businesses, it's like you're still running your own race, you're still playing by your own rules, and you're still chasing your own long-term vision. And I guess that's the difference between rivals and competitors. Like you look at basketball, we're playing by the same rules, the same time clock, the same shot clock, we're trying to score more points. It's like our points and your points then become different because we're playing two different games, but being able to watch each other and iterate and evolve what we're growing just becomes a beautiful thing. I love to dig in, like this is the part of my favorite part of the show when we talk about rivalries. Dave, you can probably see my ladybugs in the background. I just hang out with those guys while I listen to this part. But like, talk to me about where you guys first met, how your relationship was built, if you guys met before Coast was built, and like what that banter is a little bit like.
Do you want Nick to lead off on this, or?
Nick, kick us off, man.
Sure. Yeah. I think I met Dave, if I recall. I don't remember the year. I think it was 2015. It might have been 2016, but it was there was a summit in Vancouver. I think it was called Real Talks or Man Talks, something along those lines. And we don't typically have these types of summits in Vancouver, at least not with the big guests. The headlining guest was the kind of infamous Gary Vaynerchuk, who a lot of people know, of course, as being like that like social media entrepreneur guy. And I've always followed Gary Vaynerchuk. Just, he's kind of to the point and gives you like good little sound bites here and there. So when I heard about Gary V kind of coming to Vancouver, I had bought tickets to it as a gift, actually, for kind of all the leaders in my team. Wanted to go together with them. At that time, I was Physio Room. I didn't join Mayo yet, of course. Wasn't like super savvy in business, to be honest. And I thought this would be like a nice little like kickstart for our kind of business, like how to grow and expand type of thing, and maybe it'll change our mindset. But during that summit, I had met Dave before the summit started. I think it was like right outside the convention center. And one of my at that time, my manager, his name's Dave Carter, introduced me to Dave and his partner Clayton right outside the summit. And I remember Dave saying like, I want you to meet Dave and Clay. And, these guys are thinking about opening up their own clinic, I think next year or something like that. And all I could remember was I was like really shocked to see a clinic owner at this Gary V thing. I just thought I'd see like, tech people, like more typical entrepreneurs that are not clinic owners at a Gary V thing. So, again, at that time, this is back in either 2015 or 2016, industry was fairly stale, I think, in terms of innovation, growth. And then seeing somebody else kind of at the Gary Vee talk was honestly kind of refreshing for me. I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. When I started Physio Room, I didn't go to a Gary Vee talk before Physio Room started. Do you know what I mean? Like these guys would go to a Gary Vee talk before they even have a clinic. So to me, I was like, wow, these guys are kind of well ahead of the curve, to be honest. And yeah, I think, and you can add to this, I think Dave and Clay were just starting the location that year, maybe, or the next year, or maybe they were just in the early talks of it. But way ahead of where Physio Room ever started back in 2011.
Yeah. I remember that. That was that. Yeah, I love Gary Vaynerchuk exactly for the same reasons you say. Just those crazy sound bites, but some of them are pure gold. So, and yeah, it was great to meet you then. And then I know we had that bit of a funny second meeting because you were looking to expand in the North Shore. But it was funny because I guess our landlord might have been a bit under the table and was showing spaces that he probably potentially shouldn't have, because we didn't have an official non-compete clause in our space contract for the building, but they did kind of promise they wouldn't be searching for other physio, chiro, massage places, and but that was very kind of you. So what happened is Nick basically was looking at the space, and they were like, "Oh, there's this clinic going in upstairs, Coast Performance Rehab," and then Nick instantly reached out and he's like, "How do you guys feel about us kind of coming down into your space?" And me and Clayton are kind of these two young clinic owners and Physio Room, Myo Detox, whatever it was at that time. I think you guys were now Myo.
Yeah.
You guys were, like this big entity coming in, and we're like, oh,
we're not that big.
so yeah, it was I think that was a very solid move of you to kind of, let us do our thing in that space. And as we talked about the other week, I think paid off for you getting Drew and Pivotal on board at the end of the day. So I think it worked out best for both of us. And I'm definitely appreciative of you for kind of reaching out. I think that shows a lot of character for sure. And I know some people wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that story, I think Myo at that time, so Physio Room had just rebranded to Myo, and we were actually looking for our first location of Myo, like first real location of Myo in Vancouver at that time. And I remember our realtor taking us to that building. We were looking in Lower Lonsdale, actually not. I remember actually talking to Dave a little bit about like locations in North Shore, and I was mentioning Lower Lonsdale, and we were looking in Lower Lonsdale, but then our realtor at that time told us about kind of Upper Lonsdale and how there's this new community that's being built there, and there's this new building. There's anchor tenants like Whole Foods and Steve Nash, and always good to have like big anchor tenants in a building with a lot of residents. And we had looked at the space kind of right beside Whole Foods at that time, I remember, and we actually had signed the agreement to take over that lease, not knowing that Dave was actually already in the process of building upstairs. But what Dave doesn't actually know is we actually went upstairs to look at his unit because
Wow.
our realtor actually let us upstairs because he's like, I think there's actually a physio clinic that's opening upstairs. And I was like, really? Like, and we're allowed to open here? And he's like, I think so. I don't think there's anything, in the contract or whatever. And so we're like, is it? And he was like, I could take you guys upstairs if you want. It's like, sure, we'll go check it out. I remember walking around the space and just how big it was. Number one, I was like, oh man, is this like a gym? This place is massive. And then I remember looking at there was like a architectural plan or whatever. That had the name on it. It said Coast Performance Rehab. And then I think I went home that night and I looked it up. And I looked it up to see who it was. And it was Dave, Dave and Clay. So, long story short, I ended up reaching out to Dave and Clay, and I have a lot of history of just not ever wanting to create any sort of like negative competition between clinic owners. Like, part of me opening Physio Room in the first place was to kind of build community around clinic owners, because I never really felt that when I worked at other clinics. And I just felt like, I remember talking to Scott at the time, our CEO, and he didn't know anything about Vancouver and he didn't know much about Dave. He was like, "No, I think we should take it. It's a beautiful unit. Like, I don't think it's like a big deal." And I was kind of like, I don't know if I really want to like burn that bridge. Like, I don't feel like that's right.
Yeah.
Especially, I've met Dave before at a thing, and he was friends with actually some of our team members, with Gil and Lindsay, and like people knew Dave, and I'm like, I don't feel like that's right. So I remember reaching out to Dave, and we had like a pretty short meeting, just talking about North Shore and all this kind of stuff. I remember at the end, I asked these guys, we could do it together and really build the community together in North Shore, or if you guys are totally not cool with it, I totally get it. Like, I'm happy to not be in this building at all. And it wasn't like, I just didn't really feel I had at the very least should talk to Dave and Clay about it, just to make sure they're either cool with it or not cool with it. If they're not cool with it, no big deal. And I think, like, to Dave's point, it's obviously worked out well for both of us. I see that Dave's very, very successful up in the North Shore, and Drew ended up joining our team, switching Pivotal over to North Shore. And we ended up inheriting a team out by Westview. So I think it's worked very well for both sides. And it's just a very funny story.
Yeah, totally.
It's so interesting that Gary V's a common thread here. Like, to add even more color to the story, on the East Coast, I want to say it's 2016, we head to the Archangel Summit, a bunch of folks on the Myo Detox team. Gary V's one of the heavy headlines. Robin Sharma was another one. But when Gary V spoke, he talked about a concept of around rivalries pretty much as well, where it's like, you try to build the biggest building, you make it bigger by continuing to build and iterate on your own building, not by tearing down other buildings. And it's such an interesting concept, because Gary V ties us together very much so. His work ethic and a lot of, as you mentioned, David's sound bites ties us together as well. And then that concept really holds true in this conversation as well, which is so interesting. Let's talk about Physio Room's transition to Myo Detox, and Dave, obviously Physio Room as a player that inspired you as you're building Coast. You see Physio Room join Myo Detox, probably have some thoughts and what's going on there. Pivotal comes into the conversation as well. Like, as you're looking at that from the outside looking in, talk to us about your first thoughts, and where Myo Detox was then and what it's evolved to now.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll be honest, like, when Physio Room made that transition, as you said, like, Physio Room was kind of one of the companies we kind of used as a basis of inspiration. And so you have this what seemed to be like a good, wholesome Vancouver-based brand in Physio Room, and then you see this. I kind of knew about Myo a little bit before the switch over, because you guys were just taking over the gram. So so I kind of was looking into it a bit, and I was like, who is this like corporate entity? These guys are in like boardroom meetings like 10 hours a day. When are they even treating people? And like, they're going to nightclubs and private jets to California, and I'm like, what's going on here? And then I heard about the switch, and I was like, what? Physio Room? Why? So that was
you weren't the only person in Vancouver that was shocked.
Yeah, no, I honestly think that I think pretty much all of Vancouver thought that probably. So, but I love all your posts about it, Nick, and like, you always talk about like why you did it and no regrets, and I really like those posts you put up. But yeah, that was my original thoughts, honestly. But at the end of the day, as I said, I know a lot of people that were at Physio Room and now are still at the Myo Detox team, and I talked to them, and they all seemed very supportive of the move once they kind of learned more about it, and they had a lot of faith in Nick in making the right call. And then as I learned more about the company and the evolution you guys have had over the past few years, especially in Vancouver, and yeah, I'm happy to kind of have a clinic that's working alongside MyoDetox in terms of like progressing the clinical scene out here in Vancouver. And I really like all the mentorship you guys do and the communities you build within each clinic and the teams you guys have built. It's been great to see. But yeah, the initial shock, yeah, it wore off pretty quick, but it was it was an interesting move. And then for Pivotal, I don't think I was too surprised about it because I think I saw Nick and Andrew Instagram buddying for like 6 months leading up. So I was like, something's going on here. Let's just wait for the hammer to drop here. And I wasn't too worried about it because I think Coast at that point has started getting really established on the North Shore. And yeah, I had faith in our brand that we would be fine, and I wasn't too worried about the competition, and Pivotal was already so established that they were already doing their own thing too, so I wasn't too like worried or flustered about that. And if anything, I thought it was like a really good business transaction and move for probably both parties.
Yeah, as you mentioned, taking over the gram, like it's such an elephant in the room because like speaking on MyoDetox's end, like as much as it allowed us to run really fast, it hurt us in a lot of ways, right? Because the story that was being told was very, flashy. There's only so many characters. I remember when I would do posts early in the day, like I'd run out of characters all the time because like not enough of the story is being told here to really share with the world like exactly what's happening here. And we've been running backwards ever since, right? Trying to, shed more light on the story as opposed to just like the narrow window that Instagram allows us to share and speak through. And I think it hurt us a lot. And as you mentioned, like as we were working on telling a better story, mentorship, building the culture, it's like, okay, cool, like it's not exactly what it seemed to be on first glance. And we've been running backwards ever since, unfortunately. Nick, I know you could probably add more color to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the appeal actually was at that time Instagram was very early stage kind of company itself, and like I wasn't even on Instagram for quite a few years, and Myo was something I obviously heard of, and I on other episodes I've talked about just my just being obsessed with the idea of social media and how much reach it has, and I'm an entrepreneur, and I was just very interested in the ability to reach more people quickly, and Myo was ahead of the time for sure in terms of being on the Instagram very early. When people didn't even understand it. I think people don't even understand it to this day, to be honest. But it's obviously a much more crowded space now than it was before. And Myo was kind of skyrocketing in the social media world, and a big part of why I was kind of interested in joining, not because of the gram, but
the reach.
Yeah, the reach, and then I think like opening the second clinic. I've talked about this before. I felt a little bit stagnant and a point of diminishing returns as a clinic owner at that time because I was in the process of opening a third clinic, and the third clinic didn't feel as exciting as the second clinic, which didn't feel as exciting as the first clinic, right? So, and Myo was kind of like this, almost like this rebellious move that I felt like I just had to do. It was like a very personal decision, and I know a lot of people didn't understand it, and I know Dave and many other clinicians in Vancouver were probably like, yeah, this guy probably went crazy. But not really. I think again, it's everyone has their reasons for making decisions, and if it feels right to you, it's the right decision. All right, and I always try to encourage people to go with what your gut and whatever you feel is best for you first, and try not to do things that trying to appeal to or try to make everyone happy, because you're never going to make everyone happy. What you'll end up doing is making everyone kind of just okay and you unhappy. So try your best to just always do.
So Nick, did joining Myo kind of you said you kind of lost some inspiration there a bit, or you just kind of felt less inspired. Like, did joining Mayo it just kind of reignited you? It sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. In a lot of ways, again at that time, this is like 2011. Physio Room opened, and again, I think it was ahead of its time for sure. I mean, I hope it inspired younger clinic owners to take that leap into just doing something different and making it more like team focused and community focused, which I think a lot of people recognize Physio Room for that in the early days. But I was a very green entrepreneur. Like I didn't really know what I was doing. I opening the second clinic, I entered a partnership with some of the guys in my team, and that was like a new learning, big huge thing. And I was again in the process of opening a third clinic at that time, and really just feeling like, what am I doing? What does the third one do that the second one doesn't? Would I open a fourth one or a fifth one? You start to like ask yourself these questions, right? Because the logical step would be to continue opening more clinics. And Mayo at that time, and meeting Vin and Kev and Scott and all those guys in Toronto, it was absolutely like refreshing just to see something totally different. And again, like, yourself, Dave, you didn't open your clinic yet at that time. And there's a lot of great clinics out there now, with, great brands, great culture, great community, all this kind of stuff. Back then, not really. Not really.
That's
right?
why you guys stood out. That's why you guys stood out so much. Physio Room really stood out because it was kind of just like medical centers, and then there's Physio Room, which is cool. Mm-hmm. But before that, it was like so clinical and bland.
Totally. So, and Mayo, yeah, of course, I think I realized how like rebellious it seemed, and how different it was, and in some ways, I kind of wanted to push myself to take that and then maybe blend it together. To Kev's point, we've been kind of working backwards since and trying to tell a different story, because there's a lot of players in this company now, a lot of great people, a lot of great leaders in this company, and it's a company story, and we have been going backwards a lot and trying to fill in the gaps and telling a much more full story on why this all happened and where we're planning to go in the future. So but it hasn't been easy, because Instagram, like, it's kind of like the blessing and the curse, right? It just kind of like skyrocketed when no other clinic was even doing Instagram, and Maya was the only one touching it, and it just like blew up.
Yeah.
It became viral really fast.
It was right? Like, what is this Mayo? Like, you're following their story every day. Like, what is happening here?
It ended up happening so fast that like we weren't able to offer the substance that actually existed, and all you had the opportunity to see was the flash and all the things that you mentioned earlier that Instagram is very privy to. It becomes very shallow, where what you were building with Coast, which is incredible, is like you got to talk to Dave to know what Coast is about. Like, no other story will be told anywhere else. It's not going to be 2 sentences. It's going to tell the story. You got to talk to Dave, and once Dave talks to you, you're hooked. And it sounds like that's how you've been able to recruit incredible players, and you got such a strong team. Like, I'm honored in my seat to every single one of these episodes in this season. Like, I'm talking to the pioneers who like have changed this. Like, the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years is going to be because of what sounds like happened in 2015, 2016, 2017. It sounds like those 3 years was like the enterprise, and those like golden years, so to say, where like we really changed, or you guys really changed. Like, I was looking at this on the outside as well. Like, when I met Vin and he had all of these ideas and aspirations, like I just graduated. Like, I was still a student of the game, watching all of these things happen. So it's incredible to talk to all of these pioneers and trailblazers in our space, because you guys really set the stage for what is going to be the therapy space for years to come.
I appreciate that. I hope so. I definitely like the way that the industry is trending for the most part, at least clinic wise. Sometimes I get a little bit. I think Nick and I have talked a bit about it, that I get a little frustrated about like the pain science approach and how heavy-handed that can be sometimes, and how negative that space can be towards manual therapy and stuff like that. But besides that, I think the industry, I'm sure that will swing back, so I'm not too worried about that. But hopefully,
yeah. it'll follow suit for sure. I think like the value system is becoming a lot, stronger and better and very reflective of what you gentlemen are building. And I think clinical excellence and what the actual service and the people that we serve and what we offer them, I think that follows suit for sure. But a lot of work to be done there. And we'll probably get you back on here because we have future aspirations of doing an entire season just about clinical excellence and what we're chasing and pursuing, and all the infighting that really slows us down. Like we have this incredible framework of a value system, but what we're actually offering and delivering our clients and our community, it has a long way to go. And that we'll double up and go an hour and a half if we really dig into that. So as we wrap up here, Dave, you got a big team that you're building, and I'm sure you got some younger guys on your team, and there's a lot of younger folks and therapists and aspiring therapists who are listening to this. Do you have any advice to offer on where you see therapists getting stuck early in their careers, and what kind of framework and mindset they could be coming in to be more successful off the jump?
Yeah. As we talked about last week during our little intro talk, I think the biggest thing I see is, especially out here on the West Coast, is just I don't want to call it the unwillingness, but you just got to grind. Like I grind too much probably, but
Right.
I've been doing this for 8 years now, and I've literally probably worked like 10-hour client days for 8 years. I'm finally changing that because I'm having a kid in the next few weeks.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
But and I probably shouldn't be doing that as a clinic owner, I know, but I'm only 2.5 years in, so I'm still doing it. Looking forward to the change, but I haven't been just working 10-hour clinic days for 2 years. I've been doing it for 8 years at least. And here on the West Coast, most physio shifts are 6 hours, and I just got my hands dirty, just getting my hands dirty with as many patients as possible, volunteering opportunities, going to gyms, doing freebies, just getting your hands dirty. I took a ton of courses as well. I don't know if that's necessarily the right approach. I don't know if I would say like do 10 courses a year like I did for 5 years. It's not necessarily the right way. It's up to you how you feel about that. I think finding a mentor and really diving in deep with one singular mentor can be great too. And I did that in particular with one of my physios at North Van. He shadowed me a ton, and I really kind of helped kickstart his career. And he has only taken 2 or 3 courses in his 2.5 year career. But he's great, and he's a great therapist, and I think it's been because he's been able to dive in with me and some other kind of the leaders on our coast team to create the therapist he is. But if I had any advice for new grads, the 2 things I always say is if you want to get to a certain point, you got to put in the work. And 2, I do think it's important to kind of get involved in the strength and conditioning world. I think that's my basis where I come from. And I just, let's be honest, physio school is not teaching that well. So I think jumping in and not being afraid to get mentored from a personal trainer or a strength coach because you're a better physio or whatever, learning from those fields is huge.
Right. I before we wrap up, we got to unpack this. We need to unpack the concepts of grind and hard work, because I think as much as we wanted to leave in the past and build this new future, somewhere along that transition, hard work was lost. And I don't know what happened to it, but somewhere we lost the concept of grind and hard work, and how that is a commitment with being in this industry. And you're pretty much committing yourself to others, and in your position and in Nick's position, you're committing yourself to others and a team. I'd love for you to talk about grind and hard work and what that actually looks like with aspirations of being a successful clinician.
Yeah, well, I think it goes into, so Kevin has sent me a list of questions here before, and I told him I don't even want to answer the last 2 because he was going to ask me what books are you reading? It's I don't have time for books. I'm literally up at 5 a.m. I might get some exercise in, and then I'm working basically 7 or 8 p.m. I'm basically dialed in throughout that entire time. Sometimes, I might start my day a little bit later, end a little bit earlier, but typically for the past 8 years, it's been long, long days, and I'm dialed in completely. I might take breaks from clients, but I'm on my emails for an hour straight, or I'm doing an hour mentoring with someone here or there. I just think that's kind of lost now. It's like people are always need a little bit more work-life balance. And I'm not saying what I've done is necessarily right, but if anyone wants to define success and they view what we've created as successful, like that's my path to get there. And
Right.
and I think that's something similar that Nick's probably experienced too. And I think a lot of people just aren't willing to go there, and that's fine. And that's fine. But yeah, you just have to know that that's kind of what a lot of the bigger players are doing. And if you're okay with that and living the life you're happy with, then that's fine. But you got to put in that work.
Of course.
Got to get that bread.
Nick, you got any color to add? I know we talk about this all the time.
Yeah, I think I've been reading this book actually recently. I'll throw the book
words
thing
for you.
Yeah. And obviously I resonate very, very strongly with the hard work stuff, just because from my personal experiences, what you get from the other side of hard work is something that can't be valued enough. The book I'm reading right now is called Anti-Fragile, which I've been meaning to read for a long time. It's a business book that a lot of people have told me to read. It's this, forget the author's name, same author as The Black Swan. And it's actually an interesting take on fragility and on the opposite end of the spectrum, anti-fragility, and in the middle being resilient. And I just thought it was really interesting because we often think of like being fragile and being resilient, but resilient is like sustaining. It's being able to do the hard work so that you can survive. It's the idea of like, not really getting better, but maintaining. And the anti-fragile thought process is really, you should be seeking the pain and the harm because it's actually better for you. It's actually good for you. It'll actually make you stronger. It'll make you better, and you'll live to tell a great story. And we have such a negative perception of hard work that there's this massive barrier to overcome, but not really if you value what's on the other side and you want to grow and get better as a person and all this kind of stuff, like everything Dave's talking about with the 10-hour days, and like I love those days. You finish those days feeling alive, not more tired. Yes, you're a little tired, but you feel like energetic because of like all the stimulation. Like you inspired people, you inspired, you gave energy to your team, to clients, to everyone that you've touched that day. You go home feeling like more alive than you've ever felt.
Right.
And the days where you're sitting around doing Netflix all day, you almost feel like more dead in some ways. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's taught enough. Because hard work, as soon as you say hard work, it just sounds negative. Yeah. It's like, I don't know.
Walls go up for sure.
Right. So it's like an interesting concept. And I would totally recommend anyone to read that book. It's a tough read. It's really thick and it's very small words, which doesn't usually, fit well with busy schedules. But it's worth a bit of a read for sure.
Right.
I'm looking forward to reading books in 5 or 6 years too, and the same timeline as Physio Room, Nip Myodetox production. So
I definitely know the 12-hour days. I did that for many years, and to a certain point I still do that. I just have a different way of thinking about it. I love stimulation and energy.
Yeah. And I think one other thing I often say to new grads too is, the long days might seem daunting, but if you're in this field, like how lucky are we?
Right.
Like it's like physiotherapy and chiropractor and stuff, they're always listed in like the top most job satisfaction and enjoyment and fulfillment. And like, you should be loving your job. You should be. And obviously you gotta love your family and your spouses and your friends and your activities as well too. But I feel lucky to do what I do, and I love it every day.
Amazing. Yo, Dave, thanks so much for carving out time to hang out with us today. Before we wrap up, what's next for Coast? You got more clinics on the horizon? You good where you're at for a little bit?
Yeah, I think kind of our end goal, not going to put an exact number on it, but I think eventually we might get up to 4, 5, 6 clinics. We're not going to become as big as Mayo ever, I don't think, and go too big. But yeah, and right now we're just chilling, especially with the COVID situation. We're going to chill anyway, but yeah, I don't think you're not going to be seeing anything from us for another 2 or 3 years, probably at least. And hopefully, one of our younger team members or something will be kind of hopping on board and helping us grow as a unit. So I don't have to organize general contractors and all those things again and do all that heavy lifting, because that's not necessarily my wheelhouse. Clayton's really good at that stuff, luckily. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, we're building different things, but we're building something super similar where, again, we're trying to elevate our team at Myo Detox, and they're our future, and they're going to really dictate where, as far as this thing goes. So Clayton, man, if you're out there, I know you're going to listen to this, man, you're building something incredibly beautiful with Dave, and congrats on all of your success so far. Dave, what's your wife's name?
Crystal.
When you listen to this, like, you're the reason why Coast exists. That was your idea, so we attribute it all to you. Dave, before we wrap up, I know no books, no music in your life, but you said you get some sweats in. What are the ways you're sweating these days?
Yeah, well, so last year I actually did an Ironman, which was crazy. Okay. So on top of opening 2 clinics, I did an Ironman. So
Jesus Christ. See, you define hard work, man. If you get it, that's you.
So that was a bit crazy, but right now I'm just I'm trying to avoid dad bod and just trying to get some weight room sessions in and just try to go for some runs right now. I'm looking forward to kind of some pools opening back up. I know some are, but I want to get swimming again. But yeah, it's been hard with COVID, but dad bod, go away. Don't want that.
Amazing. Dave, thanks so much for carving out some time to hang out with us, man. Incredible talking to you, man. Wishing you endless success with Coast.
Thanks, guys. No, all the best for Mile too, and I know Nick and I will be connecting for sure. And Kev, hope to see you again eventually as well.
We'll be in touch, man. We'll be in touch. Thank you. Cool. Nick, another one.
We got to play some ball sometime, Dave. I know you're.
Here we go.
We've been talking about this. No, we've been meaning to do it though. I know you play.
I know.
It's like 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or something like that in North Shore.
When COVID kind of clears up here a bit more at least, I think I'll start getting ready. I don't know how those guys were playing outdoors with random scrimmages in May and stuff. I didn't think that was quite right, but I'm looking forward to balling again.
Yes, absolutely.
All righty. Folks out there in Think Tank land, appreciate you joining us for another episode. We're out of here signing off.